Today's show, Crybabies. Stories of whiners, complainers, malcontents, and how being a crybaby can get you what you need and get results, and maybe even sometimes, yes, justice. Act 3, the squeaky wheelchair gets the grease.
Behind a furniture store in West Los Angeles, I'm on a tour of handicapped parking spaces with a guy named Tom Mundy. He drives a baby blue minivan. A handicapped placard dangles from his rearview mirror. Tom flips one of several toggle switches on his dashboard.
All right, staying clear.
And the van's side door slides open. A ramp unfolds into the empty space next to the handicap spot, which is striped with diagonal lines to keep anyone from parking there. He's showing producer Brian Reed and me why this spot is for him completely useless. That striped space, the access aisle, is only 5 feet wide. A while back, Tom came here to buy a dining room table, but when he couldn't get out of his van, he sued the owner of the parking lot under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. California is one of only a few states where, rather than just suing to get the problem fixed, you can actually sue for money that goes to you, $4,000 per violation. And Tom, like a handful of other people in California, makes his living doing this over and over. He has no other job. It's his sole means of support.
All right, so you just want to follow me, Alan?
Yep.
Okay.
For the next hour, Tom leads us along 8 blocks, pointing out a half-dozen businesses he sued. From the first parking lot, we cross the street to a cramped strip mall with a dry cleaners, a beauty salon, and a store that sells breastfeeding supplies.
We're in another parking lot, and once again, I'm trapped in my van. I can't get out.
Next, down the road, a steakhouse with a giant metal cow hanging proudly over the entrance.
And we just drove through their gigantic parking lot, and there's 0 parking for disabled.
Then there's this McDonald's around the corner, which actually fixed its parking lot because of Tom's lawsuit. I asked Tom how many ADA violations are in this one neighborhood, if he had to guess. He says hundreds. And do you have any estimates as to how many lawsuits you brought within this 1 mile radius? Like more than 10?
I would say probably more than 10 where we're sitting right now.
Would you say that you might have brought as many as 50 lawsuits in this area?
I would say in West LA probably at least 50, right where I'm sitting now.
That's 50 lawsuits in West LA alone. Tom's best guess for how many he's filed altogether since moving to California 3 years ago? Over 500. Tom won't say how much he makes doing this. Most cases settle out of court for $1,000 or $2,000. But one attorney who regularly defends business owners in these cases estimated Tom has pulled in upwards of $500,000 in 3 years.
I don't want to talk about the money side of it. I think a lot of people focus on the money issue, and it's not always about the money. It's about compliance, and the stuff should have been done by the time I got there.
Do you think people misunderstand what you're doing sometimes?
No, I think most of the time they're misinformed and they just don't understand. And I've said several times, I have another wheelchair. If you want to sit in it, I can take you out and take you around and show you just little things, not big things like being carried up the steps to get upstairs into a restaurant, but just small things. And nobody's ever taken me up on that.
After Tom broke his back in a motocross accident in 1988, he had several jobs in the construction business, reviewing blueprints for compliance with accessibility rules. One company was on a second-floor walk-up, so he worked all alone, reviewing blueprints in a closet on the first floor. The bathroom was on the second floor, so if he had to go, he had to get in his van and drive to a gas station across the street. He tried to start his own consulting company to help businesses get up to code, but owners didn't seem interested. So, with the ADA on the books for more than 15 years, and Tom still seeing infractions on a daily basis, he finally decided the gloves were coming off. And that's when he found his attorney, Maurice Marbon.
Mr. Mundy and others like him have decided enough is enough, and being treated as second-class citizens is not something they want to live with anymore, and the law is on their side.
Marbon has become sort of like the Walmart of ADA lawsuits. He does a high volume of litigation, most cases for extremely low margins. He's handled so many lawsuits, he says he's lost track, but the number is definitely in the thousands. The law allows you to sue for lawyer's fees on top of what the disabled person gets, so Marbon's pulling in at least 6 figures from these lawsuits, too. His website asks, confined to a wheelchair in California? You may be entitled to $4,000. You stop by a hardware store and need to use the restroom, but find there are no grab bars next to the toilet. You may be entitled to $4,000. You're in a restaurant and want to use the restroom mirror to make yourself presentable. The mirror is mounted too high on the wall for you to use. You may be entitled to $4,000. Marbon allows that some people may find suing for large sums of money over a bathroom mirror distasteful, but he insists that without the monetary incentives, the ADA would essentially be toothless.
Even in the old Wild West, they provided for monetary compensation if you were to catch an outlaw and bring him back to justice. So this goes back a long time. We're dealing with business people here. If a business person thinks he can save even a penny by doing or not doing something, they're going to do or not do that thing.
This is how the ADA was designed, to have virtually no enforcement other than a disabled person angry enough to file a lawsuit. After a building's built, nobody checks up on its ADA compliance. That's not in the jurisdiction of any health inspector, or OSHA, or the tax board, or the EPA, or the state troopers. Nobody. So it's been left to Marbon and the handful of other lawyers doing high-volume ADA law to help make California one of the most accessible ADA-compliant states in the nation, as well as one of the most lawsuit-prone. Attorneys say well over 14,000 ADA-related lawsuits have been filed in the state.
When you do not do the absolute minimum to accommodate people who are in wheelchairs, that's tantamount to intentional discrimination. And this is what they deserve, frankly.
Yeah, I got the papers here. If you guys want to look at it.
At La Cienega Car Wash, not far from West Hollywood, Maurice Golnarahi has just been notified that his family business is being sued for $4,000.
And so what does it say? What's going on?
On or about September 21st, 2009, while patronizing said place of public accommodation, plaintiff wanted but was unable to use facilities' restroom mirror and coat hook because they were mounted too high above the floor.
The person suing in this case is not Tom Mundy, but another prolific client of Maurice Marbon named Alfredo Garcia.
Someone's using the bathroom.
Maurice leads me to the washroom to look at the alleged violations.
The mirror. Here's the mirror.
The bottom of the mirror hangs fairly low, almost down to the top of the sink handles, but apparently not low enough.
The coat hanger is right here. So, that seems pretty tall, but I don't know. I'll give him a free car wash if he wants. It doesn't make sense for me to pay $4,000 for someone that can't hang their coat up. I understand he's handicapped, but nothing to sue about. He could at least, told us or let us know. I just think it's really shady that someone that's using their disability to, sue other people, and it's ridiculous. But all we have to do is unscrew it and bring it down. It's not a big deal. So
it's a long list. You're going to look at your parking. Is it leveled? Is it right amount of parking? Is the striping correct? Is it configured?
Kim Blackseth has been helping business owners comply with access regulations since even before the ADA. He runs a private consulting firm that specializes in this. He started using a wheelchair after his own motocross accident in 1979.
Are you going up to the entry door and finding the signage, the hardware, the effort, the landing, the kick plate? And we haven't got inside yet.
The rules are complicated, partially because they take into account so many different disabilities, and partially because they're really detailed.
There's not a facility or building in the state of California that I can't find a technical barrier. I can find a technical barrier anywhere. That is no challenge to go down the street and find technical violations. And if that is your mission, and you get up in the morning, you can do it. The question is that worthwhile? Is it important? If you can't park because there should have been 2 spaces, that's not a barrier. What happens if you pulled up and there's 2 disabled people there? Find somewhere else to park. And you guys go to places all the time to park. And what do? You find somewhere else to park.
Kim is quick to add that lawsuits are a huge part of why California is so accessible, and a lot of the suits are well-deserved. He's even sued a few businesses himself when pushed far enough. But because there have been so many lawsuits, he says business owners are increasingly suspicious of disabled people.
I mean, I can go into restaurants or try to rent a room, and you can feel the tension when you go into a restaurant. You can feel as they come over, it's like, is he going to sue me? You can feel it. I can feel it.
Sometimes Kim sees the lawsuits, which are supposed to increase accessibility for disabled people, having the exact opposite effect.
I travel a lot with this business, and I called to get an accessible room, and generally speaking, those rooms are increasingly unavailable. And when I talk to clients who I represent with motels, I say, if somebody calls for an accessible room, I won't rent it. It's not worth the $150. And the risk that there's something wrong for a night's rental in that room isn't worth it to me. Hotel becomes full.
I think people don't completely get access.
Attorney Margaret Johnson is one of California's key advocates for disability rights. As it stands now, she says, the law leaves disabled people in a very awkward place sometimes, because there are so many situations where you don't want to have to sue.
To get the hairdresser that you want, that does your hair how you want it done, you are willing to go through heck for that person. I tell you, it's like, you guys are looking at me like, it's that important with that hair?
Now, just for the record, Margaret has a very classy bob with almost Louise Brooksy bangs. It was cut by a woman Margaret discovered when she first moved to Sacramento. Margaret loved her work, and to make things even better, the salon the hairdresser worked at had a van-accessible parking space. Needless to say, Margaret became a regular. Until one day last fall, when Margaret showed up to find something weird. The striped blue access aisle that made the spot van-accessible was painted over and converted into an extra parking space. She could park her van, but she couldn't get out of it, the same problem you heard Tom Mundy complain about earlier. The salon's in a busy part of town without much street parking, but she found a space in the street and navigated her way back.
So I told my hair cutter. She said, oh yeah, that's a good point. I'll make sure the owners know. Next time I went, it was still like that. I mentioned it to her again, and she said, okay, I'll let the owners know again. Next time I went, it was still like that. She said, okay, let me drag one of the owners out and show him what you're talking about. So I actually had him come out. I got in my van, and so I showed him, like how big the ramp was and how much space I needed to get off the ramp and around and why it needed to be there. And his response was, oh, the city came out and painted over it. So I'm like, no idea why the city would come out and paint over this, but whatever. So he said he would look into it. So I just went last night, and it was still that way. Now, luckily, last night, no one was parked in that space, so I kind of straddled it so that nobody could get next to me. But, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like that's an example of here's a business that had access even, and they took it away. They don't really know why they took it away, and they don't seem to have any interest in putting it back. Now, I love my hair cutter so much that I keep putting up with it, and I haven't done a letter. I haven't filed a lawsuit. And part of it's just I don't want to be, when you start doing that stuff, you start being the bad disabled person who is getting out of business's case because they're not doing the access stuff. And, it puts me in a position to have to be the bitchy, crabby, pushy disabled person that nobody likes or wants to deal with because they want disabled people to be nice and smiley and friendly and get along and not make waves and just go along with the program. It's an emotional toll. I don't know how to explain that better. I mean, why can't I just say this is an issue, fix it, and it can't be done? Why do I have to be pushed to the point of doing a lawsuit?
Keep in mind that Margaret is a lawyer. She has sued people personally, and she's been involved in large class action suits over disability access. By choosing not to have an agency monitoring these laws, something like OSHA or a building inspector, we've invited individuals to seek their own justice, to decide for themselves what they're willing to put up with, what is worth fighting over, and when, if ever, it pays to ask nicely.
MacInnis in Los Angeles.